One big question that I wanted to try and answer today is, what's the total cost of ownership for my car? Now, I've owned it for a year and about 9 months at this point. I'm about 3 months away from having it for 2 years. So I have a good feel for what it costs me to own it. Now, little background, as you may recall, I bought this car for cash, so I spent about $30,000 on it, no autopilot, and I know that's a weird thing, but I managed to get them to sell me the car as just an electric car with no autopilot. And it's kind of weird once in a while, just as an aside, because I'll get software updates that I can't use in any way because they're all about enhancing autopilot and I don't have autopilot. So it's kind of a funny thing. But because I was able to turn off the autopilot feature, I saved a little money on the car. Now, I do miss it and I might like to have it sometime. That's beside the point. Anyway, I paid cash, and what I did was I owned my van for about 10 years. And after the loan payment was paid off and I had paid for the van entirely, I actually kept making a monthly payment, essentially, to a bank account. So over the course of the next 5 or 6 years, I had saved up enough money where I could put it into a car. And that's a great tip for you if you're looking to purchase a car and you're thinking ahead and you have a car that you're still running and it still runs well. Might as well keep it running as long as you can and put more money aside so you can pay cash for your next car and save yourself the interest payments. A little bonus tip for you. So that's something that I chose to do. And of course, I got the full amount on the tax rebate and was able to get some trade-in value on my van. So there was a lot to be said for that. And it actually worked out pretty well for me in that case. So I have no car payments every month. So that's out of the picture. So the only thing I have is my electric cost. That's it. There's no oil changes. There's been no other maintenance done. Yes, of course, I had the battery replaced earlier this year, the starter battery, but that was covered under warranty, so there was no charge to me. So in my first year of ownership, between June 2019 and June 2020, I had spent a total of, because I was meticulous in keeping track of every time I plugged the car in, what the amount of kilowatt hours were and how much I was paying for those kilowatt hours. I can tell you exactly how much I paid in that first year, and the amount is, drum roll, $158. That's it. That's the total cost of ownership for me for 1 year of owning this car. That's remarkable. When I had my van, I would pull into a gas station, and when gas prices were high, I would spend between $40 and $50 per fill-up. And that would be, I'd do that every 10 days, so 3 times a month, basically. So I would spend that $150 in 1 month. I spent that in 1 year on this car, and I drove about 10,000 miles on the car. So just to give you perspective on what it cost me, I had no other expenses on this car. Yeah, okay, I bought some accessories for the car, but I would have bought accessories for anything. These were things I wanted to have, not things I needed. So, and they weren't that expensive anyway. I probably spent under $100 on all the accessories I bought. That's it. So that was my first year of ownership. My second year of ownership to date, I've only driven 6,000 miles, or I'm sorry, I've only driven 4,000 miles, and I'm kind of projecting that I'll drive about 6,000 total by the time I get to the year. Hey, the pandemic kept me at home a lot, didn't really do that much driving except for a couple of longer road trips and a couple of fun things we did. Didn't really go anywhere. So there was really no mileage put on the car. So, only 60% of the cost by the end of the year, by the end of the full rolling year, will be what I spend. So, you're only looking at another, $90 or so, right? So you're looking at, let's just round up and say $100. So you're looking at $250 for 2 years of ownership. That's unbelievable to me. Now, I am going to have to rotate the tires at some point, probably before this year is up. And when I do that, it's going to cost me something, because I'm either going to do it myself, and I have most of the things I need at home. I would need, I'll need to add in the pucks to be able to lift the car at the right spot, and maybe one other wrench that has the torque on it so that I could actually do it correctly when I take them off. But otherwise, when I take the wheels off, but otherwise, I don't have any other expenses. And I would estimate that would cost me somewhere around $50. If I take it to the Tesla dealership and let them do it, I've heard varying prices for it. I haven't actually investigated it myself yet, but anywhere from $35 to $50. So we'll just go on the outside and say it cost me $50 to rotate the tires. $50, okay. And I've spent, what did I just say? I spent about $250 total on it so far. So that would be a total of $300 for 2 years of ownership. Now, again, I traveled less this year, and I left the car plugged in most of the time when I wasn't driving it. And The system will automatically add charge when it thinks it needs it when it's plugged in like that. So you might add another half a kilowatt hour here, another kilowatt hour there. So it's going to do what it thinks it needs to do to keep the car charged. So it's going to use a little more energy. So it's not quite one-to-one the way it was, when I was keeping track of it the way I was, but it's going to be in the ballpark. Look, if I do the math backwards, you can do the math a lot of different ways. You can kind of go, all right, so over the course of the life of the car, you're paying per kilowatt hour. But because the car is so consistently consuming energy, you can actually break it down and figure out what your cost per mile is. So my cost per mile is about 1.5 cents right now. And I would imagine that's probably going to be fairly consistent over the life of the car. Though I'll probably keep track of it again when I start driving more, and I'll report back on it. But for the moment, let's just say it's 2 cents a mile. It's costing me 2 cents a mile to operate the car. So that works out to, about where I was thinking about that $250 for the cost of the 2 years of ownership if I drive the 16,000 miles. So just as a ballpark estimate, that's pretty amazing. I've spent nothing on this car. Now, I spend 11 cents a kilowatt hour at home to charge. And I don't have free supercharging anymore, and I'm not going to work to charge at work for free. So, I'm spending basically the 11 cents a kilowatt hour and occasionally have to go to a supercharger to put a little money in it. But that's it. I mean, it's really not very expensive to own at all. It's a remarkable thing. Now, you can also do a calculation to figure out what the miles per gallon equivalent is. There's a calculation that figures out, based on the gas price and your kilowatt hours and the price of your fuel, you can figure out what your equivalency is to understand what your miles per gallon would be on an equivalent scale. So doing that calculation, I'm over 100 miles per gallon MPGE, when I look at the car and how it uses the fuel. And I'm amazed by that. It just kind of throws me. I'm like, wow, it's doing really, really well. So it's a much more efficient vehicle. And with gas prices going up currently, that's a great thing, honestly, to not have to spend as much. I know we're not driving as much, but still, it's the principle here. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention. So, I've looked at, this total cost of ownership, and I keep thinking about the electric car, and I've mentioned it before. I don't see myself ever returning to an internal combustion engine. I see myself driving an electric car until my driving days are over. These cars are just remarkable. I love my Tesla, don't get me wrong, but I could see myself driving any electric car going forward just because the nature of the cars is so amazing and the way they drive is so cool. And it really is remarkable, and it's efficient, and I'm just a geek that way. So I really think that's cool. So as I look around the landscape, I see that General Motors is moving entirely to an electric vehicle inventory they're going to have. I hear about Ford doing more. They already have the Mach-E on the roads. And, you hear about Volkswagen introducing more cars, and then all these other car companies are starting to get it. Nissan and Hyundai each had a car that was out there, but they had a battery problem, so they're in short supply right now, but they'll probably come back in the near future when they actually get that battery issue resolved, and they'll get more cars out there, so it's coming. And then you look at it and you go, wow, there's more. I just saw an ad. This was a great ad. I thought, from a publicity standpoint, you cannot beat this. The Hummer company decided they're going to release their EV formally at 5 p.m. on 4, 3, 2, 1. I was like, that is awesome. What a marketing genius move. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's awesome. So I think it's a really tremendous thing that they're doing, that these companies are really getting into the space and figuring out how to do it. It's really cool. It's just amazing to me the way all these car companies are getting there. And that's why I say it's going to be easy to switch to electric going forward and continue to drive electric cars. I love my Tesla. I don't want to give it up, but somewhere down the road, I may want to switch to something else. Now that reminds me that, one other story I wanted to tell, one quick tale here. My wife, you may remember that she wasn't a huge fan of me getting the Model 3. And the reason was size. We're a family of 5. Yeah, 2 of our kids are off at college. So, it doesn't really matter as much anymore. But it's still important to have some sort of vehicle that you can transport some stuff around in once in a while. And this car was a little too small for her taste. Even though it's electric and she thinks it's cool, it doesn't really meet that need. So, it's kind of one of those things. It's sort of a, well, I wanted it. You could make the case that it was the right car for me, and it works well for what I need to do. And I've been able to take it on some road trips. And when we need a larger car, we rent one. That's fine. It works okay. Now, in the meantime, she's been thinking that it's time for her to upgrade her car. She drives a Camry these days, and the Camry you know, it's an older car and it doesn't have any active safety features. And she's like, I'd really like some of these active safety features. And what I'd really like is an electric car, maybe an SUV size that's electric. So she's been looking around, and there are really only a few car companies that make SUV size cars, real SUVs, because there's a couple that make sort of crossover size that are a little smaller. Even the Model X is kind of like that. It's a little bit on the smallish size as far as an SUV, but it's decent sized. And a couple of other companies make them. I think Porsche makes one, and Mercedes-Benz makes one, and there's a couple of other companies, but they're all very high-end cars and kind of expensive. I think they're all in the $60,000 range. So while they'd be great, they're just too expensive to be useful in some way. So that's not something we're going to be doing, spending $60,000 on a car. But she would like to drive an electric, and she had this funny conversation. You know, I said, well, why don't you just get a Tesla? And then she called her sister, and it was the funniest thing. Her sister actually owns 2 Teslas. She and her husband each own one. And they're Model 3s. And she was funny. She was talking to her sister about it, and her sister said, well, you should just get a Tesla. And I just laughed. I was like, yeah, there you go. That's what I said too, isn't it? Because this really is the car. I mean, it really is the stuff. So the idea of it is really amazing. And it was funny that she thought that. But since she wants a little bit bigger car, and there's more car manufacturers that will be making bigger cars within the next 2 to 3 years, I think you're going to see a large number of cars on the market that have electric that are the right size, or of varying sizes, whether it's a minivan or an SUV or a full-size SUV or a mini SUV, or something a little bigger that gets better battery efficiency. They'll all come in the next couple of years. So when they do come out, she'll be ready for it. So what she was thinking was, in the short term, she might just get an SUV and lease it for a couple of years, and then just turn around and buy an electric when they're available. So that might be the option we go with. And, as I said, I think now she's coming around to thinking that she'd like to drive an electric car for the rest of her driving days too. So it's kind of cool. We've reached this point where we're ready to shift and start thinking about this in a different way. And I think that is pretty amazing. And I think it's really cool that we're getting there. So cost of ownership, low. Drivability, great. I love the regenerative braking. I love not having to hit the brakes in that sense. The fact that there's so few moving parts, there's no belts, there's no hoses, there's no oil changes. All of these things just make for a great car. Now, if I had autopilot on here, I would probably look at it and say, wow, this is the nearly perfect car in that sense, just in terms of the way it drives and being able to move towards self-driving. So I might want to look at that again at some point in the not too distant future. But for now, I'm still not ready to invest in that and spend the money on it. There you go. So that's my take on what the cost of ownership is. And if you have any questions, feel free to send them along or post something down below in the comments section. Thanks for watching.